Good evening. We now are in the middle of the 10 days of Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the first 2 days being Rosh Hashanah, then the 7 days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then we conclude with the 10th and final day, Yom Kippur. It says in Svarim that every day of Aseret Yemei Tshuva, we can correct that day of the entire past year, meaning that since there's 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of the 10 days, there is a day for each day of the past year, of the Mondays, of the Tuesdays, of the Wednesdays, and we correct all of the Mondays and the Tuesdays that we can deal with all 7 days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we're able to elevate them and transform the past year of Mondays and all of those days from whatever blemishes it had. We can take it and soar heavenward with it in its pursuit of perfection. Now, I want to say to you that it's a very interesting comparison, because the Gemara says that anyone who eats Erev Yom Kippur, and we know it's a mitzvah to eat Erev Yom Kippur, he gets credit in heaven as if he fasted 2 days. Ki'ilu hisana tes v'yud. Erev Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur. Now, the question really is, Erev Yom Kippur, the mitzvah is to eat, and the Brisker Rav used to keep a candy in his mouth all Erev Yom Kippur when he wasn't eating, because he said that when you have anything in your mouth, every second is a separate mitzvah. And he kept a candy in his mouth. Now, Yom Kippur itself, and we're going to come right to the Erev Yom Kippur that I want to bring out to you. Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabboson, that we fast. We're not supposed to fast on Shabbos, but because it says Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh by Yom Kippur and by Asar B'Teves, if it comes out Shabbos, we fast. Now, Asar B'Teves cannot come out on Shabbos, but Yom Kippur does come out on Shabbos, and we fast. And when it's a weekday, like it is this year, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday, that we fast. We don't need a heter of breaking Shabbos, but Shabbos, it's still called Shabbos Shabboson. And like I've repeated to you on occasion, that the Shaloh HaKadosh, who was buried in Tveria in a cemetery with Tanoim and Amoraim, and 1,700 years, in some cases 1,200 years after these tzaddikim, goinim, Amoraim, Tanoim lived, and he was the only one in that period till today that was ever buried in that cemetery. How big he must have been and how big he was, and had the title of Shaloh HaKadosh. He asked his Talmidim, which is bigger, Yom Kippur or or Shabbos? And they all answered Shabbos because we see the punishment is more severe. Someone who's Mechal Shabbos, it is a Chiyuv Misa, a punishment of the death penalty. But Yom Kippur is Chorus, which is bad, but it's not Misa. So he answered them and said, no, Yom Kippur is bigger than Shabbos. Shabbos corresponds to Shemitah, but Yom Kippur corresponds to Yovel, which when you had 7 cycles of Shemitah, 7 times 7, the 50th day was Yom Kippur, which is Keneged Yovel. And that's why after Yom Kippur we sound the shofar, that just like at Yovel year they blew shofar and it meant that every Eved went free. We are Avadim compared to Avadim, to slaves, an entire year that we are enslaved with our Yetzaharas, and we fall in, unfortunately, quite often because we're enslaved. We try to fight it off and we try to get rid of it, but throughout the year we're human, we slip sometimes and we trip. But when it comes Yom Kippur, Motzoi Yom Kippur, we sound the shofar just like the slaves went free. We, enslaved to our Yetzaharas, go free and we sound the shofar. You see, the shofar Motzoi Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we have a mitzvah saseh lishmoya kol shofar. And if somebody stands there and he thinks, Rabbanu Shalom, I want this to be a nachas ruach, it should be a pleasant sacrifice on a silver platter, Klal Yisrael listening to the shofar and doing your ratzon. It's a tremendous pleasure. It's a reach nichoyach ta'kodesh baruch Hu. And that is the mitzvah of Tekiyah Shofar Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is a day of going out. It's a simcha. We are getting rid of all of the past. It's just not forgiveness. It's forgotten, as if it never happened. And that's why when we have Yom Kippur, we don't say we're celebrating Yom Kippur because Moshe Rabbeinu concluded his 2 periods of 40 days going up to Shamayim to plead for Klal Yisrael that they did the terrible, terrible Aveira of the golden calf, that they did the Egel HaZohav, and Moshe Rabbeinu repeatedly, Hashem said, let me just wipe them off the face of the earth and I'll make from you a new Jewish people. And Moshe Rabbeinu begged Hashem, don't do it. Please forgive them for this sin. And finally, on the last day of the 2 cycles of 40 days, Moshe Rabbeinu succeeded, Solachti Kidvarecha, and that is Yom Kippur. But we're not celebrating Yom Kippur, we're reliving Yom Kippur, because he projected and inserted into the entity of time that there's such a thing called Yom Kippur, a Yom Slicha Mechilin Kapara, and we relive that proclamation and that formation of a day of pure and entire forgiveness, and it is forgotten like it never happened, which is an unbelievable gift to Klal Yisrael, which we have, and which we are able to thrive by having this tremendous Yom Kippur. Now, Shabbos carries it with it. Shabbos is Vikarasa Oneg Shabbos, that we have the inyan of Oneg, to enjoy Shabbos. And Yom Tiv has the dimension of Simcha. So the Meforshim are curious that if Yom Kippur is supposed to be Shabbos Shabboson, where's the Oneg? We're fasting. So where does the Oneg come in? And with that, the Meforshim say that's the Erev Yom Kippur, because it would seem they're diametrically opposed. One is a fast day, one is V'inisem, you afflict your neshamas, your gufim. In other words, you feel the pain or the difficulty of fasting, no drinking, no fasting for 26 hours. And Shabbos is left without anything for Yom Kippur, the Oneg, V'karasa Shabbos Oneg, and it's called Shabbos Shabboson. So where does it come from? It is there, because it is united with the Erev Yom Kippur. So you'll say, what does Erev Yom Kippur have to do with Yom Kippur? Erev Yom Kippur, we have a mitzvah to eat and to do this, but all of the inyanim of Shabbos are incorporated into the Erev Yom Kippur, and it is united. Even the Gemara says, you fast on the 9th day, you get the credit as if you fasted. Why? You're eating, you're not fasting. But the teretz is that just like Erev Yom Kippur, for instance, we don't wash, we don't take a shower on Yom Kippur. We don't wash. But the mikveh, the Meforshim say, of Erev Yom Kippur infuses the inyan of a karasa oneg la Shabbos, Yom Kippur being Shabbos Shabboson, from the Erev Yom Kippur. Because you see that the Gemara unites the two and includes the Erev Yom Kippur totally into Yom Kippur. And the person's given credit as if he fasted 2 days. When it comes to Yom Kippur falling out on Shabbos, there are many kehilas that after they finish davening Yom Kippur night, and they don't go home to Kiddush or anything, it's Yom Kippur, they will sing all the Zmiris of Shabbos. In Shul, they'll sing all the Kol Mekadosh Shavi and the Menucha V'Simcha, everything. Why? Because there is a union between the Erev Yom Kippur and the actual Yom Kippur, and each one fills in the void of the other one that something is missing. We're missing on Yom Kippur the V'karos Oneg Shabbos that's referred to in the Torah as Shabbos Shabboson. So where's the singing? Where's the Oneg? Where's the washing? But the Erev Yom Kippur, which there's an inyan, there's a person supposed to go to the mikveh Erev. That means even if a person the whole year doesn't go to the mikveh, when it comes Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur, people who only go once a year, the once a year is Erev Yom Kippur, when we're supposed to go. Why don't we go into Yom Kippur to the mikveh? Because the day itself, say the Meforshim, is mikveh. That means we are immersed, the whole Klal Yisrael is picked up and dipped in to the mikveh. The hours and the minutes of Yom Kippur is mikveh. That a person would says all the davening, that the tahara that comes through the actual Yom Kippur drenches Klal Yisrael with the Mei Mikveh. But we're not going into the physical mikveh because we don't have to. Because the inyan was never set to go in on Yom Kippur into the mikveh by the Chachomim, because we have mikveh. The day itself elevates and immerses Klal Yisrael into all of that. So the changing and the enmeshing and the instilling to the Erev Yom Kippur what we do, that takes care of what we're missing on Yom Kippur in its essence, that it includes the inyanim of Shabbos. Now, I've said to you in the past that the shoes that we wear on Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Avelis. Tisha B'Av, we don't wear shoes because of Avelis. Sitting Shiva, Lo Aleinu, Lo Aleichem, none of us should ever have to sit Shiva. Someone sits Shiva, they're taking off their shoes, says the Arizal, and we are connecting our feet. Well, that's on Tisha B'Av, not Yom Kippur. And when we sit Shiva, we're connecting our feet to the ground. Because when Cain killed Hevel and the blood was going into the ground, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cursed the ground and said, you accepted the blood? Arura ho'adama, you are going to be cursed. So since there's din in the ground, when we are sitting Shiva or on Tisha B'Av, we connect ourselves with din because we are in a state of mourning, which is din. When a person loses a relative, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, that he has to sit Shiva for, he is under a week of din. The entire week. It's like a curse. It was like a kapeda that came on him, and that's why all the halachas of what Shiva and Avelis is kick into effect. But Yom Kippur, we don't take off our shoes because of Avelis. It was because the brothers, when they sold Yosef HaTzadik, and they got Esrim Kesef, as the Pasuk says, they took those 20 silver coins and bought shoes. And we, 3,900 years later, are still working on cleaning the slate that exists since then, that they did such a thing by selling their brother, and which caused for them a chi of misa, because the halacha, when a person kidnaps a person, it's only an aveira. But if a person kidnaps and sells the person, it's a chi of misa, the death penalty. And that's why they were killed through the Asara Aruge Malchus. But the concept of the shoes come back to us until the Geula Shlema every Yom Kippur, that we have to work in eradicating that defect that the brothers brought into Bria, into the actual world of creation, that we have another inch of kapara by not wearing our shoes. Now, we know that when the essence of Yom Kippur, and by the way, every Yom Tiv has a name, Pesach, the Masechta, the Gemara about the Yom Tov of Pesach is called Psachim. Rosh Hashanah has a Masechta and it's called Rosh Hashanah. Sukkot has a Masechta that talks all about Sukkot, and it's called Sukkah. But the Masechta that's packed all about Yom Kippur is not called Yom Kippurim like the others are. It's called Yuma. Yuma. In Aramaic, Yuma means Yom, day. Now, if you were walking with someone in the street and you said, I want to go out to lunch with you. And the person answered and said, oh, that's wonderful. When do you want to go? And the person answers and said, the day. The person would say, that's not clarifying for me when you want to go. Saying the word day doesn't tell me when. And over here, the Gemara about Yuma, and it's a packed big Gemara, is called Yuma, the day. That's all. And the Meforshim explained, because Yom Kippur is so big that we can't pinpoint it. Even it says Beferish in the Gemara that the Mekatrigim and the naysayers and the Yetzirah, all those bad influences, have no rishus on Yom Kippur to be Mekatrig and Mastin and project and claim. They can't come before the Rabbanu Shalom and say, oh, these guys, they want a good year. Oh, do they really deserve it? Look what they did 2 weeks ago. Look what they did 3 weeks ago. They don't deserve it. And they are not given rishus to be mastim because the day of Yom Kippur is so high. And that's why it's called day. Even we don't pinpoint it, even for the malachim, the bad malachim, to be able to grab it or to seize it in one fashion or another. And they can't be mastin, they can't be makatrig, they have no rishus to be negative against Klal Yisrael. And that's the reason the Meforshim say that it's only called Yuma, day, because it's above Klal Yisrael and it's above, because does it make sense that someone who did 10 Averis in the year, or 10 Averis every day of the year, it should not only be forgiven, but it's forgotten as if it never, ever happened. And that's why the Balatanya says, when we say Shemona Esrei, and we say the bracha of Salach Lanu Avinu Ki Chatanu, we end off that bracha also, Baruch Atah Hashem, Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach. Now, if we are saying in Shemona Esrei Hashem's name, how could we say 3 times a day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgives us for our Averas? It's really a bracha l'batala. We got done saying Shemona Esrei, and during the day we're talking for 45 minutes, the Lashon Hara. And then we come back to Mincha and we say Hashem's name again. Baruch Atah Hashem, Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach. Well, you said it in the morning, and then you did an awful lot of Averis during the day. You forgot if you benched, you forgot if you said Al Amichya, you forgot if you made a bracha. So you're living a very colorful day, trying your best, but tripping quite sometimes. So why are we allowed to say Baruch Atah Hashem with Hashem's name? Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach. Says the Balatanya, because when a person says it, he means it 100%, and he does try. And Hashem says, your trying wipes it off the slate. And that's how on Yom Kippur we can look at it as a day of completely forgetting what was happening, and it is forgotten. And that is our heter to repeat it. And to every day say, Chanun Hamarbe L'Sloach, Hashem's name. Because that's the power of Yom Kippur, and no human being could live up to that standard. If someone ba'aveled you or inflicted pain for whatever he was doing against you, bad-mouthing you, doing this, doing that, how could we forget, truly forget, that it ever happened? We wouldn't, but Hashem does. And that's why when we come to the next Shemona Esrei, we can say Chanun Hamarbe Lisloyach. Now, when the Kohen Gadol finished all the Avodah, and on Yom Kippur, we lein Achrei Mos, which up till Revi or Chamishi is the whole discussion of what the Kohen Gadol does on Yom Kippur. And when it comes to the last pasuk, it says that this is what that the Kohen Gadol did, B'Yom HaKippurim, Achas Bashana. Once a year is Yom Kippur. Now, every person knows from the Avodah that there's 4 days in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. There's 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Why does the pasuk have to tell us Achas Bashana, that we have Yom Kippur once a year? So the Meforshim say, if you remember in davening, when we actually say the activity that the Kohen Gadol did, at one point we say when he took the pitcher of what he had to spritz, the blood, we say Achas, Achas v'Achas, Achas u'shtayim. So the Meforshim say, what are we saying this Achas for? We should say Achas, Shtayim, Shalosh, Arba, Chamesh, Sheish. What are we saying between every one? The one. So the Meforshim say, because it's to remind even the Kohen Gadol that when you do something special, what you're in the midst of doing, wiping the slate clean, and you are the magnificent ambassador, goodwill ambassador on behalf of the entire Jewish people, don't get used to what you're doing. When you start off with a mitzvah, there is energy, and there is zest, and there is zeal, and there is warmth, and there is hislavos. But by the time we do it the 5th time, take a bar mitzvah boy, he puts on tefillin the first time, he can't sleep the whole night before. But when it comes to the 35th day, you know, it's still new, it's still relevant, it's still important, and he's careful, and he gives tzedakah before he puts on the tefillin. But he's still not shaking like he was the first day. So we want to hang on to that zest and zeal of the first day. And that's why the Kohen Gadol, we all said Achas v'Achas, but Achas u'shtayim, that the second time he had to do it should have the same fervor as the first day that he did it. And when it comes to the 6th day, Achas v'Sheish, that we're hanging on to the zest and the zeal of the first day, even on the 6th. And the lesson to us is Achas Bashana, that the relevancy and the importance of Yom Kippur is so important that the Torah tells us Achas Bashana. We know, even every 6-year-old kid knows Yom Kippur is once a year. The pasuk doesn't have to tell us for that. But the pasuk is telling us that in the 325th day of the year, long after Yom Kippur, Achas Bashana, live with the fear and the love and the trembling of what Yom Kippur stands for, that Achas Bashana, hang on to it each and every day. To some degree, we're human. We can't be perfected human beings, but we can strive for the perfection. we could want the perfection, and we could bring into reality that desire of perfection, knowing that we'll trip and we'll try to fight back. The Baal Shem Tov used to say that a person his whole life is giving every day a patch, a smack to the Yetzer Hara, which means that the Yetzer Hara gets the best of him and gives the person a smack, and he does the Aveira. And we have to give back a smack to the Yetzer Hara with regret, with tshuva, with whatever we have to do. But says the Baal Shem Tov, and the purpose is to win the game, that like a person wins his final move in chess. Was that a knockout, or was that just another item of process? So said the Baal Shem Tov that even though we do our whole lives Aveiros, but when we do the Aveira and we come back and give the smack back to the Yetzer Hara, before we pass on after 120 years, the last smack that we get in should be the smack that we give to the Yetzer Hara, not that he gets the last smack on us and we leave Chas v'Sholom this world without getting in that last smack. Now, we know that before Rosh Hashanah, men go to shul and they have hataras nedarim. That means they sit down with they stand in front of three people, and there is a nusach that we say of hataras nedarim, that we should be mater neder. That means if, let's say, a person does something, and he goes every Erev Shabbos for the last 50 years to some poor person, and you bring them a Suda, a beautiful schus and a beautiful mitzvah. What happens? The person gets sick and they're too tired, they're too weak. They can't bring the Suda. But once they did it so many years, it becomes like a neder. And what they're supposed to do is, or something that they said openly, I promise I want to do this and this thing. But circumstances present themselves that make it impossible for the person to do it. So what do? We're mater neder. And the Bezdin says to the person that you did certain things that became like a neder because you did it for 50 years. Or you said you wanted to do it and it was like a neder you were making. Now you want to nullify it. Had you known in the beginning that you would come to a point that you're so weak that you could never do it, would you have made the neder to begin with? And the person, they answer, no. In other words, I would have said, I'm doing it b'li neder as long as I'm well, as long as I'm able to, as long as I'm all of this. And that's called a heter. That's called, we're being matir neder, and some translate matir, we untie, like matir asurim, that we untie the person from what he attached himself to, and then he is free of any binding obligation. So we do it before Rosh Hashanah, and then we come into Yom Kippur before we ask Mechila and Slicha for all the Lashon Hara, for all the treif that we ate. We're eating lettuce, and if we're eating a bug that we don't know, but it's b'shogi, but we're eating a bug, which is 5 lavin d'oraisa. So there's a cheshbon of asking for kapara. So when we come to ask for all of the slicha, mechila, and kapara, we first have to have kol nidre. That means we already were mater neder before Rosh Hashanah. But nedorim are so powerful that we never take out 2 sifrei Torah. Like we do by kol nidre, 2 people each take a different sefer and they stand next to the chazan and they say kol nidre. And you know, kol nidre sparks a fear. You even talk to a Reformed Jew of what they keep in Yom Kippur. Hardly anything. But you say, well, do you go to temple on Yom and say kol nidre? Oh, we're all there for kol nidre. That's like the cementing factor in their minds of that and Yizkor. So before we begin davening, myriad, which is keneged our nefesh, and then shachrish keneged our ruach, and then musaf keneged our neshama, and mincha keneged chaye, the world of chaye. There's 5 worlds corresponding to the neshama, and the yechida is the 5th and final one. And Yechida only reveals itself once a year, and not even Yom Kippur, but on Ne'ilah of Yom Kippur. And we are able then to begin the davening after we say Kol Nidre. But till we remove that bump in the road, we cannot have smooth sailing of an entire Yom Kippur with what it embodies as we go through the holy hours and minutes and the entire day without removing first that roadblock. So it's like a heter of nedorim that Rabbanu Shalom, if we knew what the outcome would be 30 years later, we really would not have done it. Or we would not have said the custom or did the without saying b'li neder, that I'm taking it on, but that's b'li neder, provided I can do it, provided I have the health, provided I have the ability. And that's why right after Mefarshim are aghast. Why do we put right after Kol Nidre, before we start myriad, the pasuk v'nislach l'chol adas b'nei Yisrael ki l'chol ha'am b'shgaga. But what we are in essence saying, say the Mefarshim, Rabbanu Shalom, we just got done saying Kol Nidre, and we admitted that we should never have accepted this and that without b'li neder, because it became a vow, and you gave a way of hataras nedarim. You gave us a way, it's called a pesach lacharota, an opening of undoing what we originally did. So now look at all of our averas that we did with a heter lacharota. V'nislach l'chol adam, and that's the one pasuk we say, ki l'chol ha'am b'shgaga. Because even though you have an entire list and bushel basket of averas and sins that we did, some of them intentionally, some of them unintentional, but now that we expressed haTorah, give us haTorah for all of our, that's v'nislach ki l'chol ha'am b'shgaga, because we have regret for how we fell in and then we begin myriad. So answer the Mefarshim. Now, we know that the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu was working his head off, and excuse that lashon, but he was diligent and forceful to get kapara for Klal Yisrael on Yom Kippur. And at the end, the Medrash says, Hashem showed him. He didn't show him himself because he couldn't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he saw him like in a cloud. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu dressed him in a talis and said, you know, you keep trying to get the kapara for Klal Yisrael, for the ego. I want to tell you how you have to daven to get and succeed with the finalization of the kapara. And it was the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, which he taught him. So says the Medrash. Hashem, Hashem, Keil Rachum V'Chanun. And we start Yom Kippur like with a thrust, was saying it 4 or 5 times during Ma'ariv. But when we are ready to leave Yom Kippur and we're in Ne'ilah, we throw a grenade. That grenade is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, Hashem, Hashem, Keil Rachum. We are saying it in a supplication. Because what is that Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim? We know that the davening is split into 4 areas corresponding to the 4 worlds. Up until Baruch She'amar is the Olam Asiyah. From Baruch She'amar to the end of Yishtabach is the Olam Hayetzira. And the tefillas were going into higher and higher worlds. To go from Yetzira into Bria is a big jump. And that's why the Anshe Knesset Agdola put a Kaddish and Baruch Hu after Yishtabach to give us a push by answering to Yehi Shmei Rabbah and to Baruch Hu into the world of Bria. And after Bria, we go into the world of Atzilus, which is Shemona Esrei, the highest of these 4 worlds. And when we say Hashem, Hashem, Keil Rachum V'Chanun, we're above Atzilus into the world of Keser, which is the highest of the high. And that's why we keep repeating it, because like if a person's fighting someone, and they give them a zetz, and then they give them another zetz, and they keep punching until the other person drops. That's what we're doing to the Yetzer Hara and to that entire bushel basket of Averis. By repeating Hashem, Hashem, Keil Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed, Notzer Chesed Lo Alofim, Nosei Ovom V'Fesha V'Chato'o, V'Nake Lo Yenake. That by saying this in full force, as we scream out, and you hear in every shul the way they're screaming, the Hashem, Hashem, that is our hope. And that's what Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu. You almost succeeded, but you have not succeeded. Listen to what I'm going to tell you, and now you're wearing a talis, which carries the power of Atifa. And that's why we put a talis on before tefillin, because it's Toder and She'enu Toder. We put a talis on 365 days a year. Tefillin, we don't put on Shabbos or Yom Tov. There's days we don't. So the fact that we put the talis on HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the talis on Moshe Rabbeinu and said, this is what you say in your talis as the final blow to succeed in your request of kapara. Now, I want to say to you that at the end of the tefillah of the Kohen Gadol, if you look in the Matzah, you'll see he said, Yehi Rotzon Shetehei Shnas Ditza Chedva, and he went from the Aleph through the Tov. And after he gets done with the Tov, and if you look at the list of everything he asked in that Yehi Ratzon, it covered everything. anything in Olam Hazeh a person could want, he covered it. And after he says, the final one, Shetolichenu, Komemius Liartzenu, that our final bakasha, after we talk about this and we talk about that and we talk about 21 things, the 22nd thing that we ask for is the final tov of the Aleph Beis Shetolichenu Komemius Liartzenu, Rabbanu Shalom, give us the Geula Shlema. So the Meforshim all ask. And he asked for three things. I'm going to cover all three, but we'll do one at a time. That when he then came after he finished, and he asked again for a shana, shelo, shetolichenu, to Eretz Yisrael, and we will be able to come to Eretz Yisrael with the Geula Shlema Shel. So the Mefarshim asked, his last bakasha was going up to Eretz Yisrael with the Geula Shlema. Why is it being repeated over here? And the Mefarshim say, because the first time he covered the request to go to Eretz Yisrael. But the way we go is with schusim. And never should we put down another yid to show how good we are. That's why he asked the second time. He said, oh yeah, we want, and that's our conclusion, to get to Eretz Yisrael and have the Geula Shlema. But Rabbanu Shalom, I should never fall into the pitfall of looking at another yid and saying, oh, look how good I am. I mean, the fact is this, that I at least keep kosher. Look at all the Jews in Louisiana and Wyoming. Half of them never in their lives even heard the word kosher. They don't know what it is. They're Jews and they don't keep kosher. Don't put your schus of deserving anything or wanting something based on someone else's degradation and put down. That is the separate request. The first one was just to get me to Eretz Yisrael. The second one is don't allow me to fall in. And that was the Vehinichem Sham, because it says that when he finished, he came out of the Kodesh Kedoshim, he changed his clothes on Yom Kippur 5 times. Gold to linen, white linen, gold to white linen, back and forth. The last time when he came out successful from the Kodesh Kedoshim, he said, he dug right outside the Kodesh Kedoshim and took off the clothes that he was in the Kodesh Kedoshim and buried them. And the Mefarshim say, because a person achieves the greatest pinnacle, turret, level of achievement, and indeed the Kohen Gadol didn't die inside, like many of them did, because they had a machshava zara, and he succeeded. So he could have come out and said, okay, look, Rabbanu Shalom, thank you. Look what I achieved. I mean, I didn't die. I didn't have a machshava zara for even a second. And I got the kapara for Klal Yisrael. Not bad. Never pat yourself on the back. Don't pat yourself on all of the past. Look forward for the future achievement and what has to still be done. And that's why he buried the pride and ego right outside. He took the clothes and he put with the clothes, say the Mefarshim, the ego into the ground, that it stayed there, and they never used those clothes again. It was buried and they never ever took it out from there. And that is what we ask Shetolichenu Komamias Liartzenu, after we already asked for going to Eretz Yisrael. Don't make us grow and glow on someone else's weakness and failure. Now, another thing that he said is Shalo Tapil Pri Vitna, that a woman should not have a miscarriage. Now, if you look in the 22 things said, it was said there. So why did he have to come back and talk about it? So the Meforshim say he came back and talked about it because in the regular request, it was about regular conception and asking that a woman this upcoming year should never miscarriage. But after he got done asking for everything, he realized that having a miscarriage, chas v'sholom, and succeeding in not having a miscarriage is the end of the story. Because let's say the person didn't have a miscarriage, and no Yiddish maidel wife should ever have a miscarriage, but after that, what about the growth of the child? What about when the girl turns 20? There was no miscarriage. She lived, Baruch Hashem, is healthy and well. Did she trip and leave the minhagim of her family or the halachas, let's say, of Shabbos, even 10%, 2%? That was the second question, that the baby should not be lost. The first one was the physical living when the mother gave birth. But the second request was that that child who comes out healthy and well remain healthy and well throughout their life. In the other half, besides the physicality, to the actual ruchnius and spirituality. And that was the second request. Now, the third thing that was asked for, that we asked in the regular 22 stanzas, that we should have parnasa from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we shouldn't have to come on to the next one. For what we need. That our tears, that was a regular request for parnasa, that we shouldn't have to rely on someone else. But there's so many other things that come into the package. A woman could go into her house. She has beautiful children. She has, Baruch Hashem, beautiful einiklach. She gets up in the morning and she can have a fruitful, beautiful, productive day. Yet she comes home crying because she just got done looking at her next door neighbor's new kitchen, which is 10 times nicer than her kitchen. And the woman took it that she didn't think that, Baruch Hashem, we have parnasa, I have gorgeous children, I'm healthy and well, and we're this or that. She comes home crying that her kitchen is 10 times nicer than her. So it's not just the parnasa, it's to be able to recognize the bracha that we've been given and live with it and be elated with it and be productive with it and be thrust into motion of action, of proper behavior and appreciation. And that's what the Meforshim say, that's the word that they underscore with this extra request of having parnasa and not needing from one another, that we should not allow the foreign and alien messages and emotions creep in to our world of appreciation. Because bottom line, every single Yid could thrive heavenward with the simcha of appreciation, so says the Arizal. The Eibusha should help, everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful year, and that the fast should bring the kapara that we need for everything and everyone, and that Klal Yisrael needs more than ever. You know, somebody said to me, what is that person crying about Mashiach? Look how much money he has. He needs Mashiach. Every household needs today Mashiach. Even the guy that's got the $100 million. Does the 100 million mean that he's guaranteed good health? Does the 100 million mean that his kids are guaranteed to be proper and wonderful Oivdei Hashem and the army of Hashem in doing what the Torah wants them to do? Where's the guarantee? So we have to bring out the full flourish of our appreciation and go into a year with that simcha, and that's why we're thrust right after Yom Kippur into simcha, and we're going to talk more about it next week when we'll be in the realm of Sukkot, Chol HaMoed, Hoshana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, and Simchas Torah. Haba Oleinu L'Toiva.